The lawyer looked at me like I didn't belong in that room. "Mr. Carter left the entire company to you," he said. The room exploded with angry voices. Executives who had worked there for decades stared at me like I was a thief. Because I was just the night janitor. But then the lawyer raised his hand and added one more sentence. "There is, however, one condition. And that condition would change my life forever. My name is Ethan Cole. For 3 years, I cleaned the offices of Carter Global Industries. Most employees didn't even know my name. To them, I was just the guy with the mop. Every night I arrived at 10 p.m. The building would slowly empty. First the interns. Then the managers. Then the executives. By midnight, the giant glass skyscraper felt like a ghost ship. But there was always one office with the lights on. Mr. William Carter's office. The CEO. The billionaire founder. A man whose picture appeared in magazines like Forbes and Business Insider. And strangely, he was the only person who ever talked to me. The first time he spoke to me, I almost dropped my mop. "You work too hard for this place," he said. I turned around. Mr. Carter stood there, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Sir?" I said nervously. He handed me one. "Sit." I looked around like I might get fired just for breathing in the CEO's office. But he smiled. "Relax. No one's here." So I sat. That night we talked for 20 minutes. About life. About work. About people. It became a routine. Every night around midnight, he'd call me in. We'd drink coffee. And talk. Not about business. About life. One night he asked something strange. "Ethan, why are you still a janitor?" I laughed. "Because someone has to clean the mess rich people make." He smiled at that. But then he asked again. "No, seriously." I hesitated. Then told him the truth. My dad died when I was 18. I had to quit college to take care of my mom. He listened quietly. Then nodded slowly. "You didn't give up," he said. "No," I replied. I just paused. That night he looked at me differently. Like he was studying me. Months passed. Our coffee talks continued. But something changed. Sometimes he would ask unusual questions. "What would you do if you ran this company?" Or, "What do you think is the biggest problem in corporate leadership?" I assumed he was joking. But he listened to every answer like it mattered. One night I finally asked, "Why are you asking a janitor for business advice?" He smiled. "Because janitors see everything." Then one night, he didn't show up. His office was dark. I assumed he was traveling. But the next morning, when I arrived for work, the entire building was in chaos. People whispering. Phones ringing. Executives rushing around. Then someone turned on the TV in the break room. Breaking news flashed across the screen. Billionaire CEO William Carter has passed away late last night. The room fell silent. My stomach dropped. I felt like someone had punched me. Because the man who talked to me every night was gone. 3 days later I got a phone call. "Is this Ethan Cole?" "Yes." "This is Carter Global's legal office." My heart skipped. "You've been requested to attend the reading of Mr. Carter's will." I laughed nervously. There must be a mistake. But the woman on the phone replied calmly. No mistake. You are specifically named. The boardroom looked like a war zone. Executives, lawyers, family members, all dressed in black. When I walked in wearing my janitor uniform, everyone stared. Like I had entered the wrong building. One executive whispered loudly, "Who let the janitor in?" But the head lawyer stood up. "Mr. Cole, please sit." Then he opened the will. The room went silent. William Carter leaves several assets to his family, charities, and executive board. Everyone nodded. Expected. Normal. Then the lawyer paused and adjusted his glasses. The remainder of Carter Global Industries. He looked directly at me. Is left to Ethan Cole. The room exploded. What? This is insane. He's a janitor. Executives slammed their hands on the table. Mr. Carter's nephew stood up. This has to be fraud. But the lawyer raised his hand. There is, however, one condition. The room went silent again. Everyone leaned forward. The lawyer read the final line. Ethan Cole will inherit the company only if he agrees to run it for 1 full year without revealing the reason Mr. Carter chose him. My heart pounded. What reason? I asked. The lawyer looked at me carefully. He left a sealed letter. But you can only read it after 1 year as CEO. The room turned toward me. Some furious. Some confused. Some terrified. Because the janitor had just become their boss. I sat there frozen. I didn't want this. I didn't understand it. But the lawyer asked the question that would change everything. Mr. Cole, do you accept the condition? The entire room held its breath. If I said yes, I would become CEO of a billion-dollar company. If I said no, everything would disappear. And somehow, I felt like Mr. Carter was in somehow. I felt like Mr. Carter was still testing me. The lawyer repeated the question. Mr. Cole, do you accept the condition? My hands were shaking. Around the table sat people who had spent their entire lives building careers here. And now they were staring at me like I had stolen something that belonged to them. I swallowed. I accept. The room exploded again. One executive slammed his chair back. This is ridiculous. He doesn't even have a business degree. Another shouted. This company will collapse in a month. But the lawyer calmly closed the file. The will is legally binding. Effective immediately. Ethan Cole is the new CEO of Carter Global Industries. Just like that. My life changed forever. The next morning, I stood outside the building. The same building I had cleaned for 3 years. But this time, I wasn't entering through the janitor's door. I was entering through the front entrance. Employees whispered as I walked past. That's him. The janitor. The new CEO. I reached the top floor. Mr. Carter's office. Now. My office. When I opened the door, the smell of his coffee was still there. For a moment, I just stood silently. Why me? I whispered. But of course there was no answer. Not yet. 2 hours later the board meeting began. The room was full of tension. Mr. Howard Grant, the senior executive, leaned forward. Let's be honest. Ethan. He said my name like it tasted bad. You don't belong here. Others nodded. This company has thousands of employees and billions in assets. You've been cleaning bathrooms. I stayed calm. Because Mr. Carter once told me something. The moment you lose control of the room, you lose leadership. So I replied quietly. You're right. The room went silent. I don't know everything about running this company. But I do know something about people. Then I looked directly at them. And right now, this company has a people problem. I had noticed something during my years as a janitor. Executives thought no one noticed their conversations. But janitors hear everything. Complaints. Arguments. Secrets. I remembered one conversation clearly. Two managers arguing in the hallway. This company stopped caring about employees years ago. Profits first. People last. So I told the board something they didn't expect. Employee turnover has doubled in the last 2 years. Customer satisfaction dropped 18%. And internal surveys show record dissatisfaction. The room fell silent. Because I was right. Howard frowned. How would a janitor know that? I smiled slightly. Because janitors see everything. That afternoon I made my first decision as CEO. And it shocked everyone. I announced a company-wide meeting. Thousands of employees joined online. They expected a speech. But instead I said something simple. I used to clean your offices. People started whispering. So I know something many CEOs forget. You are the reason this company exists. Then I announced 3 changes. Employee salaries would increase. Work hours would become more flexible. Executives' bonuses would now depend on employee satisfaction. Executives were furious. But employees loved it. 2 weeks later, something strange happened. A major contract suddenly collapsed. Millions of dollars lost. Then another client left. And another. It felt planned. One night I stayed late in the office. The same way I used to as a janitor. Walking the quiet halls again. And that's when I heard voices in the conference room. Howard Grant. And 2 other executives. He's destroying the company. Howard said. We pushed the numbers down for a few months. The board will force him out. My stomach dropped. They were sabotaging the company. The next morning I called an emergency board meeting. Executives looked confident. They thought they were winning. Howard stood up dramatically. The company has lost millions under Ethan's leadership. I move that we remove him as CEO. Several board members nodded. Everything was going exactly how they planned. But then I pressed a button on the table. The speakers turned on. And their voices filled the room. We pushed the numbers down for a few months. Howard's face turned white. The recording continued. The board will force him out. Silence filled the room. Howard stammered. You recorded us? I looked at him calmly. No. Then I pointed to the door. The lawyer walked in. With legal authorization. Howard realized something terrible. His career was over. Within months the company changed. Employees were happier. Productivity increased. Clients returned. Profits rose again. Even the board members who hated me had to admit something. The janitor CEO was actually working. But there was still one mystery left. The sealed letter. The reason Mr. Carter chose me. And finally, 1 year later, the lawyer called again. Mr. Cole, you are now allowed to open Mr. Carter's letter. My hand shook as I opened it. Inside was a single page. And one sentence changed everything. 1 year had passed. 12 months. 365 days of pressure, chaos, and sleepless nights. But somehow, the company was stronger than ever. Profits were up. Employees were happier. And even the board members who once hated me now respected me. But there was still one mystery. The letter. The reason Mr. Carter chose me. The lawyer placed the envelope on the table. This was written the night before Mr. Carter died. He said. My heart was beating fast. For a moment, I didn't open it. Because I was afraid. Afraid the answer might change everything. Finally, I took a deep breath and opened it. Inside was a single page. Written in Mr. Carter's handwriting. If you're reading this, it means you survived your first year as CEO. And if you survived, it means I was right about you. I felt my throat tighten. The letter continued. For 3 years, I watched you walk these halls at night. Most people in this building never noticed you. But I did. Not because you cleaned my office. Because you listened. You helped employees when they were struggling. You stayed late to comfort a receptionist who had just lost her father. You bought dinner for the security guard who couldn't afford food that night. You thought nobody saw those things. But I did. My vision blurred slightly. I kept reading. This company was dying long before you arrived. Not financially. Morally. My executives were brilliant, but they stopped caring about people. And when a company stops caring about people, it slowly destroys itself. I needed someone who understood something money cannot teach. Human decency. I sat back in my chair, staring at the paper. The letter continued. You once told me something during one of our coffee talks. You said, a good leader is the person who cleans up the mess, not the person who creates it. A small smile appeared on my face. I remembered saying that. I didn't think it mattered. But to him, it did. Then I read the final lines. And they completely stunned me. There is one more reason I chose you. You are the only person in this entire company who never asked me for anything. Not a promotion. Not money. Not power. You simply showed kindness. And that is the rarest leadership trait in the world. My chest felt tight. The final sentence was written bigger than the rest. Remember this, Ethan. The man who cleans the floor often understands the building better than the man who owns it. Take care of my company. William Carter. I folded the letter slowly. For the first time since becoming CEO, I finally understood. This was never about business. It was about character. I walked to the window of the office. The same office I once cleaned every night. The city lights stretched across the skyline. And suddenly I heard a knock on the door. It was Maria, one of the cleaning staff. She looked nervous. Sorry, sir. I came to clean the office. I smiled. Then I handed her a coffee. Only if you sit for a minute. She looked confused. Why? I smiled again. Because I finally understood Mr. Carter's secret. Because janitors see everything.